everyone, so today I'm gonna be giving my opinion on something. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel and you have bell notifications for all uploads. December 13th, 2019. A new campaign was announced for the new season of Beyblade Burst Season 5. The main advertisement through this campaign, it was basically just bladers that we've seen in the past, new designs, retweet it, see it. It was a cool event. I think before we got more information, the biggest thing that people were excited about was just believing the idea that maybe Volt was going to return as the main pro tag. However, as more information came out and we got more things confirmed, like 2 new pro tags, TAKARA and Hyuga, and a rival that we didn't know the name of until later on that year, which was Lain Valhalla. I feel like if Sparking had like this line graph, it would be a line that would kind of constantly go up from episodes 1 to 14, but then after the moment that episode 15 hits, it just goes spiraling down, crashing. The season's overall biggest weakness comes with the character of Lain Valhalla. Now, of course, there's a big difference between the manga and the anime version of Lain. For starters, the pet named Harry. Now I'll show you! I think the best way to compare Lain's character, in a sense, is sort of like Jiren from Dragon Ball Super, except, you know, Jiren's obviously written a lot better. I feel like the core concept of Lain, right? It's the idea that, you know, friendship doesn't really get you anywhere, being excited for battles, it doesn't matter. What matters in the end is strength and strength alone. Of course, this is represented through the idea of flair. Flair, in a sense, is like the hyperflex of this season, where when a blader reaches true resonance, they're able to do a lot of things. Of course, flair is just really a plot device. And it's just sort of convenient that if something happens, oh, well, flair. Now, what I mean by this is, let's take a look at Lain's original backstory for why Shu found him. He saw potential in him, and wanted him not to stray from the path that he was on. You know, kind of like how Red Eye just haunts Shu for his past, and how like Shu confronted Iger when Iger was going off the wall and leaning towards a more evil side of his blading. Aside from the training where Lain just constantly broke sparking launchers, we see him battle against Free de la Hoya. Now listen, in the context of this, Free should have his Geist Fafnir repaired, and you would think that with this battle against Lain, Free would beat him, and that would give Lain the motivation to want to conquer all of the legends because of this one loss he had against the legend. Except that makes too much sense. Instead, what happens is that Lain just beats Free. Now, you could say that he broke Fafnir, or he did a burst on it. I can't really tell because they didn't have enough CGI budget to do first Uranus versus Fafnir, so it's kind of just left to the interpretation of the viewer. Now, I should say that to those who are thinking, oh, well, he has a generation Bay ahead of Geist Fafnir, that does not matter in the case of Beyblade. Now, specifically with Burst, it does not matter what layer system you have. You can look at it in the God series when the God layers are competing against dual layers, and sometimes the dual layers win. Or how the dual layers are able to compete at all with the God system. Kurtz and Silas against Volt and Shozetsu, they were giving Volt a run for his money. It is less on the system of Bay and more on the skill of Blader. Do you know what else, by the way? After when Lain beat Free, he just decides to evolve his Bay into Variant Lucifer. Now, of course, it's just, hey, oh, he was power hungry. But hey, also, did you also know the fact that since Free lost so badly, it kind of gave him this weird flashback thing where every time he saw anyone flare up, he would just get constant flashbacks to Lain. Oh, also, his whole motivation for Mirage Fafnir was specifically to battle against Lain. Okay, so now that Free has this setup, that was set up earlier on in the season. He lost to Lain. Fafnir was humiliated. He wanted to make a new Fafnir to show that this is the Fafnir that's going to defeat him and prove his strength. Do we get Free versus Lain in any sort of capacity? No, instead what we get is a very botched tag team battle between Free and Silas and Lain and Shu. And Free doesn't even attack Lain, he just loses to Shu. And Silas loses to Lain because Lain yells Flare, genius writing, right? Genius writing. And also, to be quite honest, a lot of tension in this season feels incredibly absent. There's not really a single battle that has Lain in it that I feel like, oh, maybe this would happen, or what's gonna happen here? It's just because he keeps on winning. They don't have him lose. Sure, maybe there are small times where he lost, but I think something else that also matters is in the context when you compare it to previous antagonists. For an example, Arthur and Gwyn in the GT season were only as invincible as they were because no one knew how to counter the infinite lock system and the Big Bang armor eventually. They figured out how to counter it, so guess what? They're not invincible, strategy, and they beat them. Now, Fi is a very similar case, where the real weakness to Fi was the moment that he doesn't have that armor, he is not as powerful as he would be with it. Of course, the only one to really realize this is Aiger, but still, it makes sense. Fi also got a big power boost from absorbing dead Hades, so in context in the season, Fi is less of a sin than what Lain is in this season. The issue with Lain is that anytime he's backed into a corner, he just yells Flare and wins. And he just gets to a point where it is so unbelievably boring. It would be in the same sense that if for every battle that Volt had in this season, he just yelled Rush Shoot and he won. If a character constantly wins and almost never loses, then it is extremely boring to see that character battle, because we know it's going to be one of two outcomes. I think even in the times where they try to do this fake tension thing, right? When they did Ranjiro versus Lain, it was the most boring thing that was in that season, because everybody knew that Ranjiro was going to lose. Which is very funny, because later on in the season, in the tag team he has with Aiger against opponents, he actually goes beyond his own limit and does some really cool stuff. And it's sort of like, why didn't we see that versus Ranjiro versus Lain? Granted, he did kind of throw around Lucifer a bit, but you could just chalk that down to Lain was toying with him this whole time. So from here, I really want to focus on something else, which is the idea that not only does he keep on yelling Flare and winning, and we're going to ignore the whole limit break system for his weakness, but Lucifer's weakness essentially before the limit break was that once the stamina wears down, the barrier goes down, and there's nothing to protect Lucifer's invincible, air quotations, barrier. But he still manages to somehow win in the end. We're going to focus on the three major battles before Lain evolved into the limit break system. Versus Aiger, versus Volt, versus Shu. Now in the battle with Aiger, Aiger is dumbed down to not use either accessory of the sword or the shield. Now the explanation is, oh, well, he thinks it's going to be faster to attack Lucifer and wear down the barrier. Now of course they say that in the show, and that is the in-universe explanation. However, logically speaking here, could it also be the fact that TAKARA TOMY in the original video where it shows off Infinite Achilles, it showed off the sword and the shield? Now you would think they would start off with the smallest mode, but they did the exact reverse, and then they're backed into a corner where they have to advertise the third mode for Infinite Achilles, and they have to make some stupid excuse for it. Really was dumb, because logically in the show, if when Aiger was in that tag team, or whichever one where he managed to push back Lucifer, was using an accessory, why wouldn't he do that? If it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. But his strategy does work, and he does manage to wear down the barrier on Lucifer. So you think, okay, well, Aiger's now got a pretty good chance. Except, no, wrong. Lain uses the Surge Zone to speed up, to get back the barrier, and then beat Achilles. Now, I could understand if Lain got back the barrier because it was against Fafnir or Longinus, and maybe Lucifer's weak spin, and it hits it, and the spin equalizes, and he gets back the barrier. Sure, that would make sense. But physics don't really work like that. And I know that's kind of like, well, a lot of physics don't work in Burst with all the stuff that happens. But you know, this is kind of like, it doesn't even work in real life like how he's having it. Anyways, let's move on to Volt. Now, Volt is even more of a sin for what happened. So, they have this whole thing where, again, oh, it's stage 2 and 2 or whatever. Now, Volt awakens the evolution driver to its greatest potential, fully awakened. Similar to the final battle with Eiger versus Volt. Now, in Eiger versus Volt, they were equally matched, with only Eiger giving a bit more at the end than Volt was, and managing to barely beat Volt. They were in the end. So you would think that with Volt to have such a power boost, even if it was a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina in the sense that, oh, okay, we just got a power boost last second, and maybe he could have just had that before and then he used it. Whatever, right? No, he gets down the barrier, right? And again, Lain yells Flare, and he does Variant Disaster. He beats Volt. Even worse in the sense of Free and Shu losing to Fi and having their base break. Because the context in there is that, well, they didn't figure out how to counter the armor, so that's why they're able to lose. That's literally why in Cho Z, they have an entire episode dedicated to Eiger tanking 2 bays at once. That is a simulation of what Fi did to him. Okay, so now we go to the third battle, which is Shu versus Lain. Now, Shu manages to beat him thanks to the burst blocker, which is kind of like, okay. And, you know, it's kind of like a fitting thing, like the last one to take down Lain and put him in his place was the Master, the person who trained him. Okay, so then you think that Lain's gonna learn to be humble and realize power isn't everything and he should be strategic, right? Nope. Lain is a crybaby that evolves Lucifer and beats Shu back into emo. Or he's playing emo. It really doesn't matter. Now, the most confusing thing, right, is that Hikaru and Hyuga, who get their base limit breaking, whatever, they don't beat Volt and Drum right away. Or I should say Dante. They still have to practice to learn this new system, but Lain, he just does it. Like, he doesn't even have to learn it, which is so boring. I think at the end of it, it's just the idea that this season just feels so unimportant. We have legends that have actual stories that are more interesting than the new characters, and it is all wasted. There was literally the episode in the tag team matchup that had Silas, where he had flashbacks to losing to Free and losing to Volt multiple times, and that was his whole motivation that episode. And that was infinitely more interesting than any one of Lain's battles. The issue is, in the similar sense to GT, is that because of the runtime of the episodes, they are forced to have to run along most of the things, but they still do not know how to pace things correctly, because this season could have the things, pace things correctly, and have a lot of the stuff work, and this could have easily been the best season in Burst. Instead, it's very tainted for what happens. I feel like when it comes to Sparking, there are high highs and low lows. And Sparking is a mixed bag, but it is leaning towards the more negative side. That whatever the future of Burst is, regardless of how many seasons, that they manage to do justice for it. It is what it is. Now, don't start a war in the comments, but anyways, thank you all for watching. Stay safe during these times. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and thank you for watching.